amazing live visual.
Speaking of live visual, the flap, we have more views, more cameras on board Starship, as Dan mentioned a few minutes ago. We are hoping that all 4 flaps will stay more intact than they did last time. We did make some changes to the design in order to help enable
Starship
this.
is now experiencing peak heating, remains on a nominal entry trajectory.
Great news there that Starship is continuing along the path that we intended it to fly. You can keep track with how fast it's going and how high it is above Earth using the display that is there on the bottom right-hand side of your screen.
And guys, this is where we're really going to see a lot of those improvements from Flight 4 really come into action. As you guys kind of talked about, so what's called the static arrow, those are kind of the poke out points on the flaps. Those get exposed to some pretty extreme heat environments, and so we added some additional, basically made it a lot more robust for the thermal protection there. And we learned not just from visuals and stuff like that, we had those missing tile tests on Flight 4 where we intentionally left some out, kept in some backup layers. They're called ablatives, which means they just gradually melt away to help dissipate the heat. And we've got an entire layer of ablative underneath the tiles on this Starship today. So even if you get a gap in a tile or a tile is broken, anything like that, we've got essentially backup options. And what we're really trying to do today is do an on-target landing. As we lost the flaps, you lose a lot of your control, and so we didn't land right on target last flight. This time we're trying to really nail the target within just tens of meters, and that'll just be a really huge step on feeling like we're closer to bringing a ship back. Obviously, there's a lot of work before we get there, but we just caught a booster. We're going to start looking real soon at when we can catch a ship.
So the view on your left is as a helicopter passes by Dan, bound at Starbase. The view on your left is a camera that's positioned near the nose of the ship, looking basically down toward the flap. The view on the right is looking perpendicular to the flap. So we're looking basically bird's eye view onto the flap on the left-hand side, and then a worm's eye view from the side with that view on the right.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Maverick just buzzed the tower. He might be coming back, so.
Now, these views brought to us by Starlink, it's incredible that we have this high-definition capability. In fact, that view on the left...
Starship is now halfway through the peak heating phase of entry, remains on a good trajectory.
So great news there, hearing that we're about halfway through the peak heating phase. Like I said earlier, this lasts roughly 10-ish minutes. And we did hear earlier that the flaps have control of the vehicle, so also good news there. You know, it is incredible that we've basically had views the entire time.
Right, yeah, thanks to Starlink.
My memory did black out a little bit after booster catch, so I think we had views. But, you know, all through the coast phase, we had some beautiful views of planet Earth behind the ship as it was in its orbit.
Yeah, and I also do want to point out on your right-hand screen, we've got a more encompassed view of the flap. As we watched in Flight 4, the hinge area was the area where we got a little bit of that burn through. This view, this new camera view on the ship will help us be able to visually see more of what's happening in that area. And again, we have improved our heating tiles, and so hopefully we've protected the hinge a lot better this time.
Landing chill has started.
But again, these views are additional to the data that we get on these flight tests that help enable us kind of put the data that we get in the computer to the visuals that we see and try and align those and use that for improvements in the future.
Now, we heard a call out there saying that engine chill has begun. This is an indication that we are starting to flow a little bit of the super cold liquid oxygen through the hardware, through the Raptor engine, specifically the turbo pumps, to help ensure that the hardware is at the right temperature before we give a full push, a full flow of propellant at engine startup. So all of that to say, we are getting closer to the landing burn.
We definitely are. And again, if you look at the bottom right hand of your screen, you can see the altitude that the ship is, and it has been slowly making its way closer and closer to Earth. We're currently at about 63 kilometers from planet Earth, and you'll see that number trend lower and lower as we get closer and continue through this reentry.
Yeah, this is going to go on for a little, actually a while longer. We have about 10 minutes or so, roughly, before we execute the landing, the ignition for the landing burn, starting with the landing flip. So we're making a controlled reentry. This is one of the primary objectives for Starship today, is to demonstrate another controlled reentry, even more controlled than what we saw on Flight 4. And so far, that is looking good.
And then as we start to really get lower, we're going to start seeing the atmosphere's effects start to take place, and that's when we'll be dropping our speed down closer to the speed of sound. You'll see the flaps start to maneuver. We were able to do a landing burn on Flight 4, which kind of caught all of us off guard. It was pretty incredible after seeing the flaps survive through. And we're going to try and do another one on this flight today. We tweaked it a little bit, so we're going to try and splash down at a little bit of a gentler angle this time, instead of just kind of hit the water and fall over. And the goal with that is try and keep the ship intact, and then if we're able to then get some additional video of it, again, that's just more data. And everything we can see, everything we can get extra, like a couple extra seconds or minutes of data coming from the ship after
Starship has
splashdown.
passed through the peak heating phase of flight, approaching maximum entry dynamic pressure.
All right, we're through peak heating. Coming up is basically max Q part 2, where we're going to hit kind of that part of the curve where we're still moving really fast and the atmosphere is just dense enough that we're feeling the most pressure, but hopefully we're going to start feeling a little bit less heat now.
Looks like we got more views of each of the flaps on the ship as it's making its way back down to Earth. And we did pass through peak heating and still got really good views throughout that whole period. Typically during the highest heat on the vehicle, we tend to build up a lot of plasma, and that's typically when we would lose connection or views of the vehicle. But again, with Starlink, we were able to get some live views throughout that entire process there.
And we're coming up, we'll start hearing a couple more milestones in about 4 minutes or so, when we start getting down to like the transonic, the subsonic, when we're starting to move closer to and beneath the speed of sound. And I mean, we're getting live views, we're getting live data. We've got a couple additional tests on this one today where we left off some missing tiles again to test some additional backup layers. We also have, I don't know if we can still quite see them in this view, but you may have noticed we had some kind of silvery looking tiles on Starship as well. And those were pretty much standard tiles, but they were wrapped in aluminum. And it was a pretty simplistic, straightforward one where aluminum starts to melt at roughly the same temperature where steel starts to lose its strength, not necessarily melt. And so if we see stuff melting, we know what our steel is going to be exposed to. But yeah, 59 minutes since launch, should be coming up on transonic and everything in just about 3 minutes.
Now the views here, we have coverage of all 4 flaps. We can see, so for those that perhaps didn't catch a glimpse of the vehicle before liftoff, there are 2 flaps at the forward end and 2 flaps at the aft end. The larger camera view that is there on the right-hand side of your screen, that is a view of one of the aft end or the bottom end flaps. We can start to see some heat buildup and peeking through on one of the flaps there in the top left-hand corner of your screen. Once again, Starship now at T+1 hour and 9 seconds into its flight today, re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Currently about 45 kilometers above the surface of the Earth, now 44. We are targeting a soft splashdown in the Indian Ocean, about, northwest-ish of Australia. And we are attempting to, as we did on Flight 4, perform a flip maneuver as well as
Starship is at maximum entry dynamic pressure, remains on a good trajectory.
All right, so that is great news there. Like Dan said earlier, this is basically max Q part 2. So this is the greatest amount of aerodynamic loads that the vehicle will experience during its flight. It's coming back through the Earth's atmosphere. It was above the Earth's atmosphere in space where there was no friction. We can obviously see heat as evidence of that friction buildup. The atmosphere is actually helping to slow the vehicle down. If you're watching the telemetry in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you can see that speed decelerating rapidly. Now, the 4 flaps on the ship help steer the vehicle, and one of the main objectives for the ship today is to demonstrate controlled re-entry during this phase of flight, this re-entry phase.
Yeah, and we have 6 engines on ship, but we only need 3 of them, the 3 sea-level engines. We will have that flip maneuver happen very close to touching down for splashdown. We'll do that flip maneuver, ignite those engines, slow the vehicle down immediately, and then hopefully have what we call a soft splashdown in the water. It's probably going to feel a little bit harder on the top of the surface of the water, but it'll look pretty gentle.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, we hope to have some more views, even of that phase of the flight. So fingers crossed that we can we can bring those to you. We are hoping to splash down softer than we did last time on Flight 4. Right now, Starship continuing to make its descent back to planet Earth.
Starship is at Mach 2, remains on a good trajectory.
All right, great news there. That tells us that the vehicle is traveling twice the speed of sound. So we will then, the next call out that we'll hear is that it is, traveling about the speed of sound. And then we will hear a call out that that will be the call out that it is transonic. And then we will hear another call out saying that it is subsonic, meaning going slower than the speed of sound.
Starship is transonic.
There it is. So at this point in time, we say transonic because certain parts of the vehicle, like the flap that you see on your screen, might be experiencing airflow faster than the speed of sound, while other parts of the ship may be experiencing airflow.
Starship is in the subsonic belly flop.
All right, so now the entire vehicle is traveling slower than the speed of sound, so subsonic. The crowd here at Mission Control Hawthorne also getting excited, just like us. We're awaiting a water landing. We are going to reignite the 3 engines to perform that flip maneuver, and we're basically about a minute and a half, away from the landing flip.
Yeah, the crowd's getting excited here as we get closer and closer to splashdown. Again, just about a minute away from the expected splashdown, so we should see a lot happening coming up here shortly. We're currently having a view of one of the flaps, and it is a little bit dark on your screen, but hopefully we'll get some good views of the ship as it makes that flip maneuver and touchdown for splashdown.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, we saw that speed drop like a rock. So we're doing a belly flip right now, or a belly flop right now. That's what's kind of, if you saw the high altitude campaign, that's the unique thing about how Starship comes back. So we've bled off pretty much all of the speed we're going to. We're essentially at terminal velocity.
Starship is at 5 kilometers altitude, remains on target.
Five to go, coming up soon, landing burn.
Two kilometers away.
Starship is on target, approaching landing burn startup.
So keep an eye on the bottom right-hand side of your screen as well. That will be the indicator when the Raptor engines ignite, if we are unable to see that illumination ourselves.
Landing burn startup.
What a cool view of the reflection of that landing burn.
You can see the water just behind the ship.
Starship has landed.
An incredible view. I think it is safe to say we have a ship in the water.
Touchdown!
That is a live view from the ocean surface. What an incredible end to Starship's journey. A live view from a buoy that we had out at the landing zone.
An incredible view of ship landing just about on target as they were calling out.
That was amazing. And we were not intending to recover any of the ship's hardware, so that was the best ending that we could have hoped for.
Man, I don't think we're going to be able to get a ton of extra video of the heat shield, but we hit the target. We hit the target. Yeah. I mean, we hit the target because we had these buoys placed in a pretty specific spot. So, wow. What a day. I feel like that's what I get to say. What a day. I mean, everything started off today with that launch. We were able to lift off towards the end of our window, 7:25 a.m. Central Time. 33 out of 33 Raptors in the way uphill. Successful hot stage. Booster came back. We watched it come down right behind us. Watched it get caught. And that broke my brain for a while. I'm really happy we had coast for a bit, but that's first ever booster catch, major step on the way to rapid reusability. And ship just gave us one heck of a show, making it through a controlled re-entry this time, flaps intact, made it down to the water. Hey, Starships remain